Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Fernando Fernandes, and this presentation is co-authored with Cassio Turra. Population aging impacts retirement systems primarily because it changes the relation between beneficiaries and contributors. In the case of retirement systems structured on period financial balances, known as pay-as-you-go systems, sustainability is directly affected by variations in the old age dependency ratio. Many policies may buffer the burden of population aging in pay-as-you-go systems, such as varying contributions, benefits, or both, and changing the normal ages of contribution and in retirement. Among the alternative policies, there is an increasing debate among actuaries, demographers, and economists about adjusting the retirement age based on gains in longevity. But since pay-as-you-go systems are established primarily on period financial balances, adjusting the retirement age based on gains in longevity, a life cycle characteristic, may not be effective in lessening the impact of population aging if the contribution of mortality to changes in the population age distribution is only moderate. Ryder in 1975 was the first demographer to propose a new index of old age, based on changing the concept of age from the number of years elapsed since birth to the number of years until death. The first important addition to Ryder's view was the independent work of Bale and Faber in 1981. They proposed a method to measure equivalent retirement ages based on declines in mortality. Bale and Faber's measures of equivalent retirement age are built on three pillars. First, which characteristic of a person's life determine equivalence? Second, at which point in a person's life we should measure equivalence? And last, which base year we should select as a standard. Bale and Faber proposed two characteristics to measure equivalence: the expected number of years spent in retirement as a limiting case, for it assumes that all gains in life expectancy are spent working, and the ratio of the expected number of years spent in retirement to the expected number of years spent in the labor force, that equitably distributes the gains in life expectancy between working and retirement years. They advocated measure equivalence at the age of entry into the labor force, for it's an equitable approach as it factors in the experience of people who do not survive to retirement. They also considered measuring equivalence at the age of entry into retirement, but only because it's a viable approach. Accordingly, Bale and Faber presented four measures based on life table functions of equivalent retirement ages that express different perspectives of equity. We use two demographic economic models to analyze the effectiveness of equivalent retirement ages in pay-as-you-go systems in Brazil from 2010 to 2060, a stylized demographic model and an NTA model. In our stylized demographic model, which we apply separately to Brazil states, all population between the age of entry into the labor force, 20 years, and the age of entry into retirement, 55 years, works and contributes to the pay-as-you-go system. All population older than the age of entry into retirement is retired and receives benefits from the pay-as-you-go system. The age of entry into the labor force and the age of entry into retirement are initially fixed, and contribution rates, benefit rates, and wages are not age-specific and do not vary in response to either the labor market dynamics or productivity changes. Our NTA model, which we apply to Brazil only, incorporates age profiles of NTA public pensions, inflows, and outflows. We draw data for population from the 2018 IBGE population projections for Brazil and NTA data for Brazil in 2008 from the NTA Transfers Account project. We follow Faber and other authors and use for equivalent retirement ages the ratio of expected years in retirement to expected years in work, measured at the age of entry into the labor force. We adopt 2010 as the base year, and we name old age dependency ratios calculated from equivalent retirement ages, equivalent old age dependency ratios. We may measure the level of population aging relative to the base year 2010 by calculating the ratio of the old age dependency ratio observed at year T to the old age dependency ratio observed in 2010. Likewise, we may assess the effectiveness of equivalent retirement ages relative to the base year 2010 by calculating the ratio of the equivalent old age dependence ratio observed at year T to the equivalent old age dependence ratio observed in 2010. Fundamentally, if tilde EOADR is equal to 1, then equivalent retirement ages sustain in year T the same equivalent old age dependence ratios that were observed in the base year 2010. That is, they effectively compensate changes in population's age distributions relative to 2010. These figures respectively present the density of tilde OADR and tilde EOADR of Brazil states by selected years with a reference vertical line at 1. The vertical dotted line indicates the median of the distribution. Eventually, in 2060, the median of tilde OADR is around 3.5. Tilde EOADR is quite lower than tilde OADR, but equivalent retirement ages do not effectively compensate changes in the population's age distribution. In 2060, the median of tilde EOADR is around 2.7. But a proper analysis of equivalent retirement age effectiveness should compare tilde EOADR with tilde OADR into effectiveness categories as we depict in this figure. Populations that are in the line BE age are neither aging nor rejuvenating. Those that are above this line are aging, and those that are below this line are rejuvenating, always relatively to the equivalent retirement ages base year. Populations that are in the compensation limit line, AEI, have equivalent retirement age equal to R. Ultimately, there is no compensation whatsoever to any change in population's age distributions relatively to the equivalent retirement age base year. If populations are aging, those that are above the compensation limit line observe area which are less than R and thus overload population aging. Populations that are below this line observe equivalent retirement ages which are higher than R and thus either undercompensate, that is, increase R less than necessary, effectively compensate, namely, increase R as much as necessary, or overcompensate, specifically, increase R more than necessary. Similarly, if populations are rejuvenating and the retirement age R do not need to change, those that are below the compensation limit line observe equivalent retirement ages which are higher than R and thus over-rejuvenate populations. Populations that are above this line observe area which are lower than R and thus either under-neutralize, that is, decrease R less than necessary to increase EOADR, or effectively neutralize, specifically, decrease the retirement age as much as necessary to sustain the same equivalent old age dependency ratio, or finally, over-neutralize, namely, decrease are more than necessary to increase the equivalent old age dependency ratio. For example, this figure plots tilde EOADR by tilde OADR using data from the United Nations 2019 revision of world population prospects for 201 countries or areas between 1950 and 2100, using 1950 as the base year. Here, only 6.5% effectively compensate population aging. 27.5% overcompensate, 45% undercompensate, and 19% over-rejuvenate. This other figure plots tilde EOADR by tilde OADR for Brazil 27 states between 2010 and 2060. Except for a few cases until 2020, 94% undercompensate population aging. This figure plots tilde EOADR by tilde OADR separately for each of Brazil 27 states. The higher the slope of the plotted points, the lower is the era effectiveness. The states with lower effectiveness are Rio Grande do Norte, Distrito Federal, Espírito Santo, and Amapá. As previously, this figure plots tilde OADR by tilde OADR for Brazil 27 states, but now incorporating the NTA model for Brazil. We observe that the age profile of public pensions in Brazil worsen the effectiveness of equivalent retirement ages, increasing the slope of the plotted points. In conclusion, three main points. First, equivalent retirement ages are intrinsically ineffective. Second, equivalent retirement ages may not effectively buffer the impact of population aging. And third, age profiles of public pensions may worsen the effectiveness of equivalent retirement ages. In the case of Brazil, the generosity of Social Security worsened the effectiveness of equivalent retirement ages. Thank you.